Welcome to 70 Years, 70 Muppets. More Muppets, please. A Muppet fan podcast presented by ToughPigs.com. This is the podcast where we continue to celebrate the Muppets' 70th anniversary with a series of spotlights on our favorite Muppet characters, from fan favorites to the most obscure. I'm this week's host, Danny Horn, and the Muppet of the Week is Dr. Phil Van Neuter, performed by Brian Henson, with Bill Beretta performing the character's Hands, making his debut on Muppets Tonight in 1996. Now, 1996 was a fascinating year for the Muppets and for Muppet fans, because that was the year that the Muppets had both a new movie, Muppet Treasure Island, and a new primetime network show, Muppets Tonight, which was very exciting because obviously that meant the Muppets are back, as people tend to announce every 5 years or so. And then we experienced the now traditional disappointment when the movie tanked at the box office and the TV show was canceled after 6 weeks. But to understand the character Phil Van Neuter, we need to go live in that 6 weeks for a minute, that special time when we haven't been canceled yet and anything is possible. Muppets Tonight was Brian Henson's attempt to recapture the magic of the original Muppet Show, but still feel fresh and new and up to date. This was not your father's Muppet Show. Well, it was not Brian Henson's father's Muppet Show. The pitch of the series was, we've got a show for you, guaranteed brand new. And the way to indicate that this is not just a remake of the original show was to push most of the well-known Muppet characters off to the side and introduce a huge number of new characters right away, with the expectation that America would fall in love with what is basically a new cast right on the spot. So, for example, they decided that their most popular, world-famous character, Kermit the Frog, would hardly be included in the show at all, and instead the host of the show would be Clifford, a really fun and funny character that basically nobody had ever heard of before, and they didn't necessarily take to on the night. Now, making all these cast changes was an incredibly gutsy move for two reasons. First, it wasn't syndication like The Muppet Show, where you get a long leash and you could build an audience over time. This was 8:30 on Friday night, primetime family TV, where the network was expecting a hit right away. The second reason that launching a new cast was risky was it wasn't the 70s anymore, when people would just sit there and watch what they were told to. In 1996, America was watching Muppets Tonight with their finger on the trigger of the TV remote, more than happy to switch over to Comedy Central or the Sci-Fi Channel, or any number of other options if they didn't like the thing that they were looking at. So literally every minute of those early episodes of Muppets Tonight was a precious chance to either hook people on this funny new show, or lose them forever. And so, in the second episode of Muppets Tonight, they introduced to America Dr. Phil Van Neuter.
And now it's time for another episode of Tales from the Vet.
Hey, you! Scared you, didn't I? Yes, always. I am Dr. Phil Van Neuter, your friendly veterinarian. Come with me now as I open the secret files to the strangest animal stories ever told.
It is insane that they did this so early in the show, because Dr. Phil Van Neuter, who I really like him a lot, but Dr. Phil Van Neuter is deliberately off-putting, and he does not fit in with the beloved Muppet cast at all. Just start with the look of the puppet. He doesn't have the traditional familiar Muppet eyes that are supposed to focus according to the magic triangle or whatever. Dr. Phil's very small eyes have tiny pupils that stare directly in front of him, right at the camera and into your soul, and he has dark green glasses over his eyes that are tied on around the back of his head for some reason. He's yellow-green, which matches the dark green lighting effects in these Tales from the Vet segments, which, again, is deliberately designed to feel spooky and off-putting. He has a shock of yellow-green hair and sideburns and a huge nose and a huge mouth and huge ears, and he swings around the set in a way that none of the other Muppets do, just kind of like throwing his huge head around, and his hands kind of dance in front of him, creating this back-and-forth rhythm, and he just looks like a crazy person, and he is screaming. And America is saying to itself, what in the world am I looking at? And this sketch goes on for 3 minutes.
What? Your secret files that are so secret they're not even here! Mulch!
So here they introduce the other half of this sketch, Mulch, a big, ugly Frankenstein monster who doesn't talk and just growls really loud. And this is how Dr. Phil Van Neuter behaves.
Mulch, where's the secret files? Oh. Too busy, eh? Let me see. I, Dr. Phil, write on the show, act on the show, schmooze the network, whereas you, Mulch, look after the secret files. Gee, I wonder who has more to do.
So in addition to not looking like a Muppet character, he also doesn't sound like a Muppet character. It's not just the voice, it's the tone of his voice. He's an egotistical performer and an abusive boss, and he feels very specific in a way that I can only compare to Penny Waxman from the Muppets Mayhem. He's in that area, like both physically as a puppet, as well as emotionally and the way that he talks. I think both Penny Waxman and Phil Van Neuter are kind of disruptive in their respective shows in a similar way. A character that feels like a very pointed caricature, which really stands out from the rest of the cast.
Of course you have a lot on your mind. That's because your brain is the size of a walnut. In fact, I had to put another one in your hips just so that you could walk.
And here's another way that Phil Van Neuter stands out. Muppets Tonight created a lot of comedy duos, including Andy and Randy Pig, Seymour and Pepe, Johnny Fiamma and Sal, to some degree David Hogselhoff and Spamela Hamderson, plus Statler and Waldorf, Bunsen and Beaker, and Clifford and whoever his talk to was at any given moment. But the thing that's unique about Dr. Phil Van Neuter and Mulch is that theirs is the only dynamic that's openly antagonistic. Mulch is not just the long-suffering assistant who's actually really close to his boss, the way that Beaker is with Dr. Bunsen Honeydew. Dr. Phil and Mulch insult and threaten each other quite a bit.
Go on and take me to the union, you creep. See what I care.
And this will they, won't they, mostly hostile relationship is the entire point. The actual Tales from the Vet story takes up about 30 seconds of the 3-minute sketch and is not very funny. The actual comedy material is Phil Van Neuter and Mulch in conflict with each other. So again, as far as the audience is concerned, what are we supposed to fall in love with here? It's funny, at least I think it's funny, but the audience, and especially the kids in the audience, are not going to get attached to these new characters who we just met, and all we know about them is that they hate each other. Like, the character of Sal the Monkey is intended to be annoying, but we're expected to like him anyway because he has such a sweet bond with Johnny. That duo gives us something to connect to emotionally, in a way that Dr. Phil and Mulch absolutely does not. It's just such a weird answer to the question, what does America want to see on Friday evenings? In general, the creators of Muppets Tonight had a hard time getting their heads around that question, and I think Phil Van Neuter is the perfect example of that. So what is this character doing here? If he doesn't really fit in with the Muppets, and he's not designed to appeal to anybody in the audience who might be sticking around after Family Matters, then how did Phil Van Neuter end up taking up space in the second episode of this all-important Muppet comeback show? And the answer, obviously, is that he's a Brian Henson character. And 1996 was the golden age of Brian Henson doing whatever the hell he wants. At the time, Brian was in charge of the Henson Company and in charge of the Muppets, with enough power to create two enormous, expensive movies, The Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island, neither of which did well upon release. And now that he has a chance to remake The Muppet Show, he and his buddy Bill Barretta are going to do whatever it is they're going to do. Barretta's involved in this character as well. He's performing the hands of Dr. Phil as he spins and sways and lurches around the set. And the rule in 1996 is if Brian and Bill are having a good time, it stays in the show. So you end up with a character with a distinct not funny to children vibe, which just does not animate any of the other Muppets of the time. Like, Clueless Morgan is more accessible to the kids, and he kills people. There's an example of this which is one of my all-time favorite Muppets Tonight moments, the Tales from the Vet holiday party tape. It's in episode 201. The show was magically given a second life on the Disney Channel, where it would be nice to have good ratings and maybe become a successful cable show. And the very first act for this new season is a Tales from the Vet sketch. Dr. Phil hurts himself at the top of the sketch, so he tells Mulch to play a tape, and instead of the movie he's supposed to play, Mulch puts on the video taken at the Tales from the Vet office holiday party from 1993.
Can I have everyone's attention, please? Can I have everyone's attention? All right, here's to the completion of another great season of Tales from the Vet! Whoops. And I just wanted to say... All right, I'll say it! You're the best crew I've ever had!
We're the only crew you ever had!
Oh, cut it out, Ed, cut it out! By the way, everyone, go easy on this eggnog.
And over the course of the sketch, Dr. Phil gets totally hammered on eggnog, and he acts like a terrible 90s boss, just berating his crew.
She was. Come on, everybody. Come on. Sing along, everyone. You freeloaders.
And then he goes around singing this.
I have a platinum card, a platinum card, a platinum card. I have a platinum card, and you all just have green one.
This is a joke that no other Muppet could get away with. It is realistic and unpleasant in a way that Muppets generally aren't allowed to be, and this sketch goes on for 4 minutes. It's lunacy that this is episode 201, and they're doing this right out of the gate. The only explanation for this is that Dr. Phil Van Neuter is therapy for Brian Henson. He's working out who he is, being a member of the cast, and also being everybody's boss at the same time. Like, by this point, Brian has been the host at a lot of Christmas parties and wrap parties, and this sketch is like a nightmare version of himself as the boss. When Dr. Phil complains, I have to write on the show and act in the show and schmooze with the network, that's Brian. That is his actual role. So that is the story of Dr. Phil Van Neuter and Muppets Tonight. Both of them sadly underappreciated, or perhaps correctly appreciated, but not by the people who were supposed to be the target audience at the time. Dr. Phil wanted to scare people, and he did. He scared them away.
"70 Years, 70 Muppets, More Muppets Please" is a Muppet fan podcast presented by ToughPigs.com. Hosted by a myriad of people and edited by them as well. Produced by Joe Hennis. The Muppets 70 logo is used with permission by the Muppet Studio, with thanks to Danny Iglesias, Frank Reifschneider, and Lee Slaughter. Don't forget to follow ToughPigs.com on all social media platforms, and you can support us by heading to patreon.com/toughpigs or by buying merchandise at tpublic.com/toughpigs.